Well, thank you again, everyone, so much for being here. I want to welcome you to Stubborn Praise. I'm James Cruz, and my co-host is Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. And we do this series typically every other month. And our goal is to bring you poetry for the here and now, poetry of praise in spite of everything else that's going on right now. And our special guest tonight, I'm so thrilled to have Naomi Shihab Nye with us, sharing space, sharing her own work. And of course, we're grateful to Shift at Mile High for sponsoring this program as well. So again, thank you all so much for coming. And remember to use the chat and Q&A if you have any questions for us.
And I do want to, in addition to saying thank you to Shift, who does all kinds of programming for all people in terms of offering mindfulness tools. They do yoga and meditation and poetry classes. I have several, and James has one that still has some space in it, which is a meditation and writing class. And James, you want to say just a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So it's going to be a webinar that starts next Friday, February 19th, and more information on the Shift website. But basically, it's just an excuse for us to talk about poetry, writing, mindfulness, and we'll start off each evening with just a short meditation, just to kind of get centered, let go of some of the noise of the previous week, and come back to our bodies, our writing, ourselves. So very excited to offer that. Thanks for mentioning it.
And I saw that Carrie Sherman from Shift has just put Shift's address there in the chat bar. So you can find their website there and find ways to find James's class. James, maybe you'll read a couple of poems for us.
Sure, I would love to start. So Naomi asked us to explain the Stubborn Praise title of the show. And I know many of you may not, maybe coming for the first time, may not be familiar with the show. So Rosemerry and I decided to start this show, I believe it was back in June, something like that. And we thought about, what do we call it? What do we want it to do? And it's like, we want to like stubbornly praise this world, this wounded world in need of so much help and repair right now. And what I realized is like, oh, I have a poem called Stubborn Praise. So I had shared the poem with Rosemerry, and we thought it was a great title. We discovered later that Rosemerry also has a poem called Stubborn Praise, and we're not sure who inspired the other person. But the idea is to, bless the unkind, the mean, the petty, the things that drive us crazy, because they teach us the most, and so that's part of our goal too. But I'll start with a couple poems tonight, and instead of stubborn praise, I'm going to offer you some shameless praise in honor of the coming spring. So this is shameless praise. And when the world refuses, you must sing your own praises, must let that music rise up from the deepest places in you and pour out its shameless hymn. Listen to water as it seeps between gaps in rocks, how the Rottweiler next door looses a string of barks and snarls, warning anyone who passes by to think twice before entering his yard. Hear the hum of the fridge chilling the milk, the butter, the sweating pitcher of lemonade, how everything sings of itself. Even the coffee maker flipped on with a careless touch this morning, puffing and croaking its own wisdom like the chorus of peepers who have come again to the creek this spring, who spend all day and night praising the mud they slip deeper into, singing of the warmth that fills them. So of course, here in Vermont, we love the spring peepers. that let us know the season has changed. The next poem I'd like to read is called Savor. This is a word, Savor, that keeps coming up for me in my writing. And I think it's just an invitation to stay with and savor the world as it is around me right now. And this poem was born from a quote by E.B. White, the great essayist and author of Charlotte's Web. He said, "Every morning I awaken, torn between a desire to save the world and an inclination to savor it." So I think those inclinations are very intertwined and related, but that birthed this poem. This morning I choose to savor the spill of yellow lamplight where lady beetles gather to warm the armor of their spotted shells, and blue jays already screeching at the empty feeders in the yard, surely a form of speech calling me to see their need and bring out a few scoops of sunflower seeds for them. I savor the way a line of snow balances on a bare oak branch, not a flake out of place, and how creosote dims the wood stove window until a log inside, hollowed by fire, resembles a tiny cabin with several lit windows of its own. How can we save the world if we've forgotten the simple act of pausing to admire the slim disk of a winter sun rising as fog sifts across these mountains, the ghostly breath the old timers still call holy smoke, stopping to point whenever they see it? So that poem describes a phenomenon here in Vermont. This fog appears over the mountains that we call holy smoke, because you can never quite touch it. It just is this very evanescent thing. I love to look out and see it. So Rosemerry, would you share a couple of poems for us as well?
Yeah, that was wonderful. I especially love the little sweet play of save. How do we save the world and savor? That was really lovely. I'm going to start with a poem. I thought I do love poems because it's February, and when isn't a love poem? Because come on, you can't just you can read them any day of the year. But this one starts with a song that comes from Finland, and it's in Finnish, and it says basically, watch the waves on the water as they move together toward the ocean until they become one big water. And wouldn't it be amazing, says the song, if we could do that too, if we could all move together in one direction and not ask why. Oh, and come together, move together, come together, and not ask why. Katson vieran kalvohon, kaikki katuu sieltä. Alto solisten, uuden aallon tieltä. On kuin sielu sullahen huutuis kulkuune, virran kerran viris pois, kusumatta kunne. Love. Though I am undeniably broken, I come to you with no need to be fixed. I come to you the way one river joins another river, not joining out of thirst, but because there is so much power and beauty in giving oneself to another and moving through the world together. I come to you the way the half moon enters the yard. I could be more whole, but in the meantime, I will bring you everything I have. And here's a love poem I just wrote this last week. I did a really beautiful pilgrimage, a virtual pilgrimage with Kayleen Asbo. And she asked us this question: what do you want to bridge? What opposites do you want to bridge? This is from here to there. Forever may I build this bridge between you and me. Build it with words, sincere and strong. And when the words don't quite reach, I'll build the bridge with silence. And when the silence falls short, I'll build it with longing. And if the longing won't span the gap, I'll fill in what's left with history, with hope, with facts, with fantasy, jazz, poetry, shoelaces, old gum, feathers, toothpicks, candle wax, gauze of ruined dreams, almosts, apple peels. I swear I will use anything it takes to build this bridge. And when it falls apart, as bridges do, I'll build it again with my bones, with my tears, with my shadow, my light. Oh, friends. It is such a pleasure now to have Naomi join us and read poems. I'm guessing that all of you know who she is, but she's I think there are several things that I really appreciate about her as poet in America right now. And one is her unfailingly courageous and simultaneously beautiful voice, kind of speaking for underdogs. And another is her bridge building ability. And I wanted to point out one of her books, Voices in the Air, in which she does build bridges between voices of other writers, of other thinkers, and it's a book that is fabulous for grown-ups, but it's also very accessible for young people. And I bring it up because, let's face it, there aren't a lot of really great poetry books out there, although maybe Naomi can tell me where I'm wrong about that. But it's one that I would feel thrilled about giving any child and say, hey, read this book. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of her poems that are accessible for younger people also, but I thought I'd just point that one out in case. James, anything else you want to say to introduce Naomi?
I'm just so happy to have her here. And definitely also check out Naomi's many, many anthologies alongside of her own amazing work. It's just such important work that she's done on behalf of poets and poetry. So Naomi, take it away.
Thank you, my friends, for your love and encouragement. It's so wonderful to hear your voices, to hear your poems, and thank you for welcoming me to Stubborn Praise and letting me be in the circle with all these beautiful people you've attracted to this program. I'm speaking from downtown San Antonio, Texas, where the pink roses are blooming madly and the days are warm and luscious. And we're supposed to go into the 20s this coming week, and everybody's a little worried about it. But I'm thinking of everybody around the country in all of our different weathers and how poetry has sustained us and held us in its palms during this past difficult year. We're coming up to the year's anniversary of when we started staying home and when everything was canceled. And it's haunting to think about this year that felt like 10 years in a way, and also felt as if many parts of it were in slow motion, but a deeper viewing and possibly a lot more anxiety of many kinds. And I also just want to send my love out in this month of love to all of you who have experienced the virus within your own families or your own circles of friends, loved ones, neighborhoods. Such a difficult thing. And I just think that those of us who are lucky enough to this point not to have caught it need to keep reminding each other that so many people were not that lucky and not due to any faults of their own. So please keep them in our hearts this month. And I wanted to start with a quote from poet Tom Clark from a book called Truth Game. And I just love this quote. Poems ought to have memories. They should remember other poems. At this moment, the noisy city has fallen quiet, and the edge of the forest is abuzz with voices, the voices of poems beneath the old trees, talking quietly about the poems that were once here, but are not here any longer, remembering each other. Well, I love that quote this year more than ever. And I think that's one thing that poems help us to do, remember each other, imagine each other, remember experience from other eras of our lives, remember times when poems found us and held us and helped us. Somebody just wrote in the chat line that they had nice pictures on their screens until I came on, which sounds very worrisome. Maybe I should, what should I do? Should I take my face off or something? I don't know. Tell me if you think I should do something,
I
Rosemerry.
think that I actually made it so that you were the only thing that people could, you're the main, they
Okay.
see you instead of everyone. I just changed the
Okay.
view.
Well, my apology to the person whose screen I messed up, but a few other people said they can still see us all. So,
You look beautiful.
all right. I'm sorry to you. Well, here are two love poems. Dead branch. I've fallen in love with the dead pecan branch outside my window. Small birds flock to all the twisty branches to sing for us. They open their beaks in harmony, chorus their little hearts out. At first, I hoped a big wind would snap the branch off, bring it down. Now it's a treasure. Palestine. My grandmother knew the real treasure of the world was a pink line on the horizon, owned by none, commanded by none. Every evening she climbed a rickety wooden ladder, barefooted, to the flat roof of her very simple home, to gaze out over stolen hillsides and valleys and smile. The valleys were small next to the sky. And our grandson is turning 5 in 2 days, and he is one of the little wonder poets of the world who walks around saying incredible things like, I love you more than all my toys, or I'm trying to keep my bones awake. Just every day, full of joy, full of commentary. And so one day, right after he left our house, I just quickly wrote down 5 things he had said that day, but I'll just read you 3 of them. Tearfully, I want to be 93. I want to catch up to everybody. In my heart, I'm not 4. Mosquitoes. It's okay if mosquitoes bite me. They're my friends. It's my life. Well, the truth was we don't have mosquitoes in the winter in Texas, but we were just discussing how nice that was, that we didn't have them. But he was saying, well, I kind of miss them and they're my friends. And then it's my life. I love that. And he dug up an old rusty nail and he said, look at that. It's so old, it must have come from a church. And then he was also digging in the dirt, and he knows my late father's name, Aziz. And this is what he said. I mean, he knows nothing about where Aziz's ashes went. We've never talked about it. It's not a topic, but it's called Connor Digging in Dirt. Aziz, come out. Help me, Momo. That's me, Momo. Your dad might be down here. Really? Aziz, I miss you, and I never even met you. Are you there? You know, when we talk about children having this sort of innate poetry instinct, um, it's just underscored again and again and again. We don't have to look far for it to be made manifest. And it's always so encouraging to realize we start out that way. As William Stafford said, some of us try to just keep up the habit, but many of us start out that way, speaking to everything and believing that everything can hear us. So I'll read a few from, since you so kindly mentioned Voices in the Air and Finland, I will read you Arabs in Finland. Their language rolls out, soft carpet in front of them. They stroll beneath trees, women in scarves, men in white shirts, belts, baggy trousers. What they left to be here, in the cold country, where winter lasts forever, haunts them in the dark. Golden hue of souk in sunlight, gentle calling through streets that say, brother, sister, sit with me a minute on the small stool with the steaming glass of tea. Sit with me. We belong together. It's always been very touching to me to be in a different country and then see people from yet another country and just think about all the layers of immigration in the world. It's so touching. And in another way, the immigration of literature. Some years ago, I was doing, it was sort of before anybody had talked about Zoom. And I remember having to go to an office building to do it, but it was a class where somebody had a special kind of setup with big screens. And it was a class with university students and teachers in Baghdad. And things were still very rough there, as I'm sure they still are, all the time, up and down. And I asked a Zen Buddhist teacher friend of mine, what would you do in this circumstance? I feel very humbled by having the opportunity to speak with them, but I'm a little anxious about it. And he said, I would just ask them a lot of questions and let them speak. So one of the questions I asked was, what has helped you get through so much upheaval, so much tragedy in your neighborhood, so much loss, so much pain? And a professor jumped up and said, Emily Dickinson. She has helped us more than anyone. We've been translating her poems into Arabic, and I was just stupefied by the joy of this, since she was the first poet I ever fell in love with in my life. And suddenly we had so much ground to talk about just relating to that. But this was a poem I wrote shortly after that incredible meeting that day. And it was filled with love for text, love for books, love for language, love for one another's voices, which is what we always need to remember when we think about war in another country or any country. Emily, what would you do if you knew that even during wartime, scholars in Baghdad were translating your poems into Arabic, still believing in the thing with feathers? You wouldn't feel lonely, that's for sure. Words finding friends, even if written on envelope flaps or left in a drawer. And I'll read a few poems from a collected in new poems book that's just out called Everything Comes Next. And it's also intended for young readers or older readers, anybody who picks it up. Before you can. My Jewish friends are kind and gentle. Not one of them would harm another person, even if they didn't know that person. My Arab friends are kind and gentle. Not one of them would harm another person, even if they didn't know that person. They might press you to drink 45 small cups of coffee or tea, but that would be all. My Jewish friends have never taken my house, my land, herded me into a cell, tortured me, cut down my tree, never once. My Arab friends have never built a bomb. We respect each other as equals. We look somewhat alike. We laugh similarly. We have never said the other should not exist. So where is the problem? Exactly. Let's be specific. Who and where and what is the problem exactly? You have to know before you can fix it. One thing that many of us have been talking about this year is books that are sustaining us. And last night I was part of a wonderful event around the Alberto Rios book, A Small Story About the Sky. And this book came out in 2015, but his book from 2020 is Not Go Away Is My Name, from 2020. And I have been an Alberto Rios fan for 45 years, maybe. I wrote him a fan letter years long ago when I read his first few poems. And I would urge you to read these books. They are so incredible. And the poem that I selected to talk about is the last poem in the book of The Broken. And it starts out, something is always broken. Nothing is perfect longer than a day. And then it goes on talking about various kinds of breakage. And it ends with, something is always broken. Something is always fixed. And it made me think about, yeah, but you have to know where the broken thing is. So that's why I thought of that poem maybe to read tonight. But if any of you aren't as familiar as you might be with Alberto Rios, his voice is so sustaining, and he carries that incantation power, kind of creating a chant, a hymn, a lullaby, a magical spell in so many of his poems that I have found myself reading them out loud this year and really feeling fortified by them. So somebody just asked, what was the last poem about friends? Oh, it's called Before You Can. And it's from Everything Comes Next. So I'll just read one more from this book and then maybe two little ones from Castaway. And so this is for all of you who live in places that have snow, and all the great young poets of Canada and our own country, the young poets of Winnipeg. Scurried around a classroom papered with poems. Even the ceiling, pink and orange quilts of phrase, they introduced one another, perched on a tiny stage to read their work, blessed their teacher who encouraged them to stretch, wouldn't let their parents attend the reading because parents might criticize, believed in the third and fourth eyes, the eyes in the undersides of leaves, the polar bears 1,000 miles north, and sprouts of grass under the snow. They knew their poems were glorious, that second graders could write better than third or fourth because of what happened on down the road, the measuring sticks that came out of nowhere, poking and channeling the view, the way fences broke up winter or driveways separated the smooth white sheets birds rode on with their feet. Really, some of the best young poets. I've met so many thousands of them in my life, but some who really blew me away for quite a while were in Manitoba and Winnipeg. And it was due to their teacher, their great teacher, Lisa Siemens, who exposed them to poetry every single day of the school year, shared poems with them, listened to their voices, loved them, encouraged them to send their work out into the world, which was how I first heard of them. They sent me a stack of poems. So I'll read just two more poems. And these are from, a lot of writers have been talking about having books that came out last year, quote, into the void. no book signing parties, no getting together with friends, no readings in the flesh. But somehow, I don't know, I just felt lucky to have two books come out last year, even though I couldn't do anything much about them. But this one was even more ironic because it's about picking up trash, and it came out right on the brink of the period where no one wants to touch anything. We don't want to breathe in each other's spaces. We don't want to touch anything someone else has touched without sanitizing. So I'll just read you a couple of poems from Castaway, Poems for Our Time. This poem has come back into favor because, this book, kids are reminding me you can wear gloves. You say to use tongs. We're using tongs. We can still do it. And I say, yes, right, I'm doing it again myself. But it was an ironic moment to come out. So here are two from this book. Trash is a ticket to nowhere. It says, I do not care about you, poof. You can pick me up if you want to. The person who dropped me was more important than the person who picks me up. What? Make our smallest moves the right ones. On a San Antonio street called Dallas, the corner of Baltimore, all of us connected, like it or not. If we're alive, isn't it all ours? Even the street called Cary Grant. Bent wire, styrofoam, snaps. Here's the rim of a pizza box from the Mesozoic era. Trash says, disregard, disregard. And when you pick up trash, you do, of course, find treasures as well. And last night I heard the most stunning story from Joaquin Zihuatanejo, who lives in Dallas, talk about his grandfather bringing home a box of not basura, but tesoro, not trash, but treasure, when he was a boy. And in the box was the Norton Anthology of Poetry, which changed Joaquin's life forever. And he sat and read William Blake to his grandfather and saw this new light come into his grandfather's being. I just thought that was one of the most beautiful trash stories I've ever heard. So through all of my picking up over my entire lifetime, many things have seemed like treasures to me. And I'll just read this and then stop and we'll discuss things. 3 wet report cards on Camden Street. Sorry, all that homework, and now even your own name has washed away. Report cards from the late 1970s, dumped in a clump, smudgy grades, teacher comment areas bare. Was someone moving and they fell out of a box? I'm tempted to leave them, lying by the curb behind the Catholic school, feeling great sadness for the hard work of teachers, filling in so many little boxes, dreary evaluating and judging, when what teachers love best is that spark of discovery, that great question, the shy person finally speaking from the stage. So you can write, I used to say to kids in classrooms when they would say, ma'am, I have nothing to write today. I'm so empty. My life is so bad. I'm vacant. I would just pull the classroom trash can next to that person's chair and say, so write about this. And they would look at me like, she's crazy. And then they would write an incredible poem. Always the trash can poem would be like the best one from the whole class. And so I think because I had such an affection for cleaning up my own hood when I was a kid walking home from school, and in those days putting everything in my paper lunch sack and then throwing it away when I got home, the habit has transferred over, and I'm very happy that these kids are all writing me now about their trash projects. It's very sweet. So thank you. I hope there was some praise in that. Praise for everything, praise for everybody, praise for what we lose, praise for the voices of children. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you both for inviting me. And may I just ask you both, because you're two people I admire and love so much through your poems and selves, what poems or rituals around poems, either reading or writing them, what's really kept you going this year? I mean, we've been longtime readers and writers of poems, but have there been particular voices, particular rituals around them,
Mm.
anything like that?
Oh, well, I could say that listening to James read poems online has been awesome. And there is something wonderful. James has done it quite a bit, and a few other people I know have been just spontaneously sharing poems that they love by reading them aloud, like in a video, of course, but reading them and hearing people's voices, infusing the poems with that energy, um, has been thrilling because it's opened up. It makes it very personal, and it makes it reach in just a little bit sweeter, deeper. And also, I've gotten to learn about so many poets I'd never heard of before. So that's been really fabulous.
And there's an intimacy when you hear James read. It's as if he's speaking to you in your room right at that moment. So
Mhm,
we all thank you for that, James.
mhm.
Well, thank you. I mean, actually, I think the reading of those poems, and Rosemary was doing it as well, which I very much appreciated. But I think the reading of those poems and just, having to figure out how to do it on my phone and then upload it, that ritual, especially during the month of April, I think I did one every day. And that really kept me going. It just felt so good to put something positive or uplifting out into the world when so much was uncertain and just dark and so dreary. I mean, I do my best to put on a brave face, but there were days when it was hard
Yeah.
to be happy or to find that light. And once I would share something, put it out there, I just felt better. So it felt like an extension of writing in my notebook or reading poems just on my own. It felt like an enlarging act, just being able to share it and hopefully look in the poem for some kind of nugget of wisdom for what we're all going through right now. Yeah, so that was and it still is a very sustaining and important ritual. Um, I love going to my desk every morning. I show up with a cup of coffee and I have no idea what I'm going to write. And just the thrill of the blank page, a full cup of coffee, that lamplight that I mentioned earlier, the lady beetles, the wasps and flies who are attracted to the light.
And that's very I think that's kind of sweet that you asked that question, Naomi, because it sounds like the question that you were asking, what has helped you get through the pain? And they said, Emily Dickinson. What's helped you?
Well, I would say being with one particular child, since I'm not able to be with so many in person, but being with a lot of kids on Zoom in their classrooms has been very fortifying, incredibly sustaining. And that morning ritual at the desk with the cup of coffee across the country, I'm with you, James, um, just sitting down and having the quiet, open space of time.
Mhm.
And reading my Dalai Lama calendar that someone gave me, a daily calendar, and following the advice of a young Instagrammer in San Antonio who says every morning write down 3 things you really hope to do that day and then write one single sentence affirmation for yourself. So I find this young woman appealing in her voice, and I thought, okay, I'll try that and see how that feels too, because I wasn't used to doing that, like a 3 to-do list and an affirmation and then writing. It's been really good. I've found that it's a very nice little container to start out the morning,
Mhm.
and then listening to poems that I've loved, read by other people that you can find online, going to videos and finding so many new ones, new things to listen to. Listening to music I've never heard before. I've been one of those people, when you hear someone in an interview somewhere say, well, this is the music that keeps me going, I instantly have to race and listen to find that music if it's something I've never heard before. And so you keep expanding your circle the way we do with poems and poets. Yeah. And so you, Rosemerry, what about you?
Oh, well, I have a question I'm dying to ask you, actually, that's a little bit on the heels of what you were saying, which is, getting to spend time with this one child. And you mentioned how as kids, we have this instinct, right? And I know this from my own interactions with kids in schools and out of schools and my own children. And things that I'm curious about are like, one, how do we lose that instinct? What is it about our culture right now that's not sustaining that? And how do we get it back? Like, how do we feel that? You mentioned William Stafford saying, that's what we're trying to do is keep fueling that. But what are some of your ideas about what are we as a culture doing to kill that instinct, and how do we reinvigorate it?
Well, to me, it's always seemed what I mentioned in the Young Poets of Winnipeg, the measuring sticks that come out of nowhere. How good is this? Is this, um, is this living up to your standards? What are your standards? Where people start wanting to judge themselves. And I was just being with a bunch of sixth graders all day. The other day, I could see they were actually writing their poems in the chat box as well as reading different poems. And it was an amazing flood of images, material going on through every session. But I could see how some of them were struggling not to judge themselves. You mean that's really okay? You mean that doesn't sound weird? You would really call that a poem? Like they were second guessing these incredibly beautiful things they were writing. And we were talking about unexpected connections that day, and mysteries, and culture, heritage, and food, and memory, and our hands and feet that have been with us through the whole pandemic. What have they been holding? Where have they wished they could walk that they didn't get to walk? And these kids were they were brilliant. I thought they were just amazing. But it was as if they were doubting themselves the whole way. And I think it's that human nature where we start becoming self-conscious and judging ourselves, and um, putting us up next to one another. And they were so happy that their teacher was writing too. And she was writing incredible little phrases would pop up from her. I didn't know her at all either. So it was all a revelation to me, this fabulous group of people. And it just kept getting better and better as the day went on. And I felt I was knowing the teacher better. And the kids, I don't know, she said they always warm up as the day goes on Zoom. And you could just feel their joy in one another. And I think that's what we need to get us past all that measurement. When they would say, but it sounds a little weird, I'd say, who cares? It sounds great to me. Who else thinks it sounds great? And all these exclamation points would come in the whole chat box. And so there was a sense of, we're hearing one another, we're encouraging one another. I've always loved the Galway Canal quote about a writing workshop is useful in so much as it encourages people. That is the usefulness, as it encourages people. And also, I would say, as it expands our knowledge of other poets or other styles we may not have written in ourselves or know that much about. But why not be more encouraging, as people are to a baby when a baby first learns to walk, like, come on, take that step, that next step, you can do it. And then so quickly, it becomes those report cards that have now all washed away. Who remembers anything about any test? I say that in some poem of mine, no one will ever remember a test. And I really believe that. You will remember your projects, you'll remember your field trips, your artistic exhibitions, you'll remember all these amazing things about your school, but you won't remember a test. I mean, I do remember that I failed the math SAT. I remember that, but but I don't remember anything about other tests.
I'm a fellow failer of the math SAT, by the way.
That was so terrifying. Yeah, and to get a high mark on the language one and a zero,
Yeah,
like a practical zero on the
wow.
other one,
Mm,
like
yeah,
I'll never go to college. What will happen?
slightly devastating.
I know.
It,
We just
it
have to
seems,
keep encouraging however we can and giving books. I heard a writer speak the other day in England, and she said, I just believe in giving books all the time. Give books to people who think they don't want books, give books to kids who say they're not big readers. Just keep reading to others, sharing, sharing, sharing books that we love.
Yep.
And that helps, because we're lucky we have these shelves behind us with books, and we can go to so many things that are right at our fingertips, but um, helping
So
others.
that actually brings up one of the questions that we have in our chat box, Naomi, this is from Leanne Bartolini. I hope I said your name right. Can Naomi talk about the room she is in? Is this where she writes? Can she speak
Well,
surrounding herself with stuff?
yes, and I like to think of myself as a minimalist. So this room rather defies that self impression. I do write out on our sun porch that has very little on it, but a big wooden table in the mornings. And then when I work with a computer, I work in here. It's where my computer is. But this is just a little tiny studio off of our kitchen. And I have a washer and dryer in it right next to me. You can't quite see them, but I love their humming abilities. And I like hearing machinery going. And we live in the heart of downtown. So we have buses, we have a lot of sounds around, a lot of bird song though, because we're also right next to the river. So yes, this is my little space. And the gallery in here is always changing, although there are some things that have been up quite a long time. And my love to all of you out there. Thank you for asking about it. I wish I could invite you into it.
Here's another question. This is from Laura Mahal. She says, the first poem I ever came across by Naomi Shihab Nye was Gate A4. The message is beautiful and it brought tears to my eyes. My father-in-law was born in what is now Pakistan, and this kind of kindness is in an airport is so real. My question is, how do we get back to this kind of trust, love, companionship, togetherness? That kind of comes back to that line that you had, we belong together, at the end of that poem. How do we get back to this togetherness? Do we lean into poetry that shows the way to love, or do we write of divisions and bring the truth to light? How do you keep your hope alive so that you can write fusions of the two?
Oh, that is such a beautiful, huge question, and so beautifully stated. And it reminds me of the Rios poem about things are broken, things are always fixed. How do we keep doing that? And the dedication at the front of Castaway is, I can't save the world, but I can pick up trash. And I think we have to keep trying to affect in small positive ways anything that's within our reach. And of course, in these Zooming days of ours, more is within reach. I mean, one great gift that we have is that we could be in Pakistan and London and Singapore in the same day. We could speak in a way that, hopefully I'll be in a Dubai Poetry Festival this Friday, early in the morning. We have a chance to have a larger reach, but also not to forget the smaller reach, the consolation of neighbors, which I think for so many people has been huge during the COVID year. When you find these little things on your porch and you leave things on other people's porches, and you just know that this transmission is helping us all keep going. And also you try to mend some things. I mean, I think this year has been a real opportunity in many ways for people have told me anyway, they're, writing to people they hadn't written to in a long time, or phoning up people they hadn't spoken with in a long time. And if there are places, we know where they are, where they might need to be mended, what can we do? And, it's not always easy, but just the continual practice of it. I wish there were, an answer to that question that was as once and for all as the gate A4 seemed to change from drama and trauma to an incredible, astonishing coziness. And I wish that for all of us in whatever realms we're in. And sometimes it takes, making huge efforts that we don't even feel equipped to make a lot of the time. And one great thing about the media, public news, I think, is how so many news broadcasts this past year have ended with, what some 12-year-old did in Michigan, or this kid who started the project to help all these other kids who weren't having enough food in some town. And so we keep hearing about these really, really amazing grassroots efforts by people everywhere to help one another. So I think people are doing it everywhere. And when we feel disheartened about something that's broken, let's try to fix something ourselves, or find someone who is doing some fixing and then be supportive to them.
Mhm. I think this is probably our last question before we have a last poem from everyone. This one comes from Eduardo Ray Brummel. Hello, friend. He says, how do you poem? Do inspirations tend to arrive from writing or from merely staying open away from the writing? So do you?
I like to go with our beloved, recently moved into the air, Marvin Bell, who said, I like to read something, then try to write something, then read something, then try to write something. And sometimes the writing reflects what I have read. And there was this like continuous thread of discourse between what we read and write. And I also like to think about not needing big ideas, not even sometimes needing small ideas, just needing a faith and trust in language, in phrases, in words themselves. I was interested when Amanda Gorman, our hero, our collective national hero, told Anderson Cooper, another hero, that she didn't really start with images in her poems, that she started with words. I thought that was really interesting because a lot of us do sort of close our eyes and think of an image that feels resonant at a particular moment, or any kind of sensory experience that feels resonant, but not a word so much. But everybody starts in different ways, and I think you can start in many different ways. But if you're feeling like that vacant field, read some things you love, and then see what little nudge they give you. Where would you go with that? I love to tell people to go to the Lewis and Clark College William Stafford Digital Library. You can never go wrong with William Stafford poems. They will take you somewhere. Don't forget about them. And they are available to us. And W.S. Merwin poems will help us in so many ways to feel grounded, through their timeless spirit, to feel grounded back in our own time. And I just wish you all so well with your own loves for poetry and your own desires to speak.
What a good answer.
Yeah.
There is one more question, and I thought we could answer it with whatever poems we choose to read right now. And this last one is from Janelle. She says, stubborn praise has been inaccessible to me, but I can manage stubborn gladness. And her question is, what does praise or gladness sound like, look like, taste like to you in this season? So maybe we can answer that with whatever poem we read next. So I'll go first and then pass that off to you, James, and then we can end with Naomi.
Sounds good.
This poem, The Path of Love, the teeny little story that goes with it is I was at a auditorium full of people. It was crazy. We were all sitting right next to each other. And I ran into a woman who I am madly in love with, Ju Jeanette, a mystical poet goddess. And she said to me that she was asking this question over and over, is this the path of love? And it just moved me so much. Is this the path of love? And for a long time, I've been asking myself that question. And then this poem came up, The Path of Love. And here I thought the path of love would look like love, like kindness, like generosity, like gentleness. Instead, it looks like me being bothered by the sound of loud chewing, me wanting praise, me needing to feel loved. Oh, hello, me. How elegantly love has arranged for me to meet all the parts of me that would stand in love's way. How easily it shows me I've thought of love as a destination. But here is love with no expectation. Here is love with no name, no locus. Here is love with no face, no shape, no promise, no vow, no hope. Here is love as itself. Surging, flowing, love as itself, insisting on love. Love as itself, eroding all those layers of me that still think they know something about love. And love holds me while I rail. And love throws me back in the stream. And love is what is still here when I am not.
Yeah.
James?
Oh, thank you so much. I love that poem. It's one of my favorites of yours. So I'm also going to read a love poem, and I love what you said, Naomi, about, I think it was Tom Clark, the quote you shared about poems having memories. And so this poem very much remembers the poem Love After Love by Derek Walcott. Owes a great debt to that. So this is called Self-Love. Treat yourself as an honored guest in your own home. Sweep the floors, whisking loose hairs and crumbs into the dustpan, clearing cobwebs as if you were about to arrive here for the first time. Stoke the fire in the wood stove, stacking logs of white pine and birch whose bark curls into flames that will warm the whole house as you step inside your body, learning to love its shape like never before. Offer yourself the wedge of brie you've been keeping at the back of the fridge. Pop open whatever bottle you've been saving for the moment you finally become your own dream date, your own special occasion. Now sit at the table set for one and feast on a simple meal of bread and cheese, relishing each taste of this new life, which has always been waiting inside you.
Wow. I love those poems. Those were marvelous. That was so thrilling, exquisite. Look at those comments, James. Become your own dream date, right? That's so beautiful. Well, mine is very, very minimalist compared to your beautiful love poems, but it does have the word love in it. Thank you for those gorgeous, they're like anthems. Those are poems to live by, live with. Isn't it great that we have poems that we can feel that way about, our hymns? Penny. Penny on the Salt Lake City airport floor, right after I thought of you so hard. How long have you been gone? You will never be gone. It was shining in the gate of Little Plains to smaller places, Sun Valley, Casper, picking up the light as those towns do, as you would have loved to see. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for picking up that light. Thanks so much for joining us, Naomi. Thanks, James. Thanks to all of you who've joined us this evening.
Thank you
So
for
many
your
wonderful
warmth.
notes. We have something very special to announce about a special edition coming up in a month. James, do you want to spill the beans?
Sure. So coming up March, look out for the date. We're going to have Ellen Bass on the show talking more about praise. I think of her as the queen of odes. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you, everyone.